What would you do if a desperate soul appeared at your doorstep on a freezing winter night, pleading for help without words, only fear and exhaustion in their eyes? Would you turn away, or would you open your heart, not knowing that this one choice could change everything? For Jack Morgan, a lonely widower with nothing left but memories, that moment came in the form of a battered, pregnant German shepherd, and neither of them would ever be the same again. Let us know where you're watching from. The snow fell heavily that December night. Jack Morgan sat alone in his small wooden cabin, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. At 65, the retired Army medic had grown used to silence. His wife, Eleanor, had passed away 3 years ago, leaving him with nothing but memories and an empty house at the edge of Pine Creek. Outside, the wind howled like a wounded animal, making the old windows rattle. Jack poured himself another cup of tea, his weathered hands slightly shaking. The cabin walls were covered with faded photographs, most of them showing a younger Jack in uniform standing beside fellow soldiers. Now, those friends were either gone or lived too far away. His only daughter, Sarah, had moved to Europe for work. She called once a week, but calls couldn't fill the emptiness that surrounded him day after day. As he walked toward his armchair, a strange sound came from outside, something between a whimper and a cry. Jack froze, listening closely. There it was again, clearer this time. He placed his cup down and moved toward the door, his heart beating faster. Maybe it was just the wind playing tricks on his tired mind. Jack opened the door slowly, and the bitter cold rushed in, stealing his breath away. The porch light revealed nothing at first, just swirling snow and darkness. Then he saw her, a large German shepherd, collapsed at the bottom of his steps. Her golden brown fur was matted with snow and ice. Her eyes, amber and frightened, looked up at him pleadingly. "Good Lord," Jack whispered, rushing down the steps despite the ice. The dog tried to stand but couldn't, falling back into the snow with a painful whine. As Jack knelt beside her, he noticed her swollen belly. She was pregnant, very pregnant. "You poor thing," he said softly, removing his wool cardigan despite the freezing cold. He wrapped it around the shivering dog, noticing cuts on her paws and a deep gash on her leg. She had been running, maybe for miles, through the forest in this terrible weather. Jack gently slid his arms under the heavy dog. Years of military training had kept him strong, but he still grunted with effort as he lifted her. "It's okay, girl, I've got you now," he whispered as he carefully carried her up the steps. The dog whimpered but didn't struggle, as if she knew this stranger was her only hope. Inside the warm cabin, Jack quickly made a bed of blankets near the fireplace. He placed the dog down carefully, noticing how her breathing came in quick, shallow pants. Her eyes never left him, watching, waiting, filled with both fear and desperate trust. Jack's medic instincts kicked in as he examined her closely. The gash wasn't life-threatening, but she was severely dehydrated and exhausted, and those puppies could come any time. "Where did you come from?" Jack asked, stroking her head gently. There were no houses for miles around, just forests and the occasional farm. The dog had no collar, but her coat, despite its current condition, showed she had been cared for once. Had she been abandoned? Left to die in the snow because her owner didn't want the responsibility of puppies? Jack's hands trembled as he poured water into a bowl. His quiet, predictable life had been interrupted in the most unexpected way. But as he watched the German shepherd drink desperately, something long dormant stirred inside him. A sense of purpose. A feeling that tonight, of all nights, he was exactly where he needed to be. The dog finished drinking and laid her head down, her eyes still fixed on Jack. He couldn't leave her like this. The nearest veterinary clinic was in town, nearly 30 miles away, and in this blizzard, it would be a treacherous journey. But what choice did he have? Jack reached for his phone and dialed the emergency vet number he kept pinned to his fridge. A remnant from when he had his old retriever, Max, who had passed away 5 years ago. Pine Creek Emergency Veterinary Services, a tired voice answered. Yes, hello? This is Jack Morgan, out on Willow Road. I found a pregnant German Shepherd collapsed on my doorstep. She's injured, exhausted, and I think she might be in labor soon. Jack's voice carried the urgency he felt as he glanced at the dog's heaving sides. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Amelia Reyes, the night shift veterinarian. Mr. Morgan, I understand your concern, but the roads to your area are completely snowed in. Emergency services aren't even attempting that route tonight. Jack's heart sank. She might not make it till morning, Doc. There was a pause on the line. Do you have any medical training? Army medic, served for 22 years. Another pause. That changes things. I can't come to you, but I can guide you through what needs to be done. Can you describe her condition in detail? For the next 15 minutes, Jack described every symptom, every wound. The dog, whom Jack had started calling Luna in his mind because her coat reminded him of moonlight through trees, watched him with trusting eyes as he gently examined her under Dr. Reyes' guidance. The good news is her injuries aren't life-threatening, Dr. Reyes concluded. But she's definitely going into labor within the next few hours. The bad news is you're going to have to help deliver those puppies. Jack swallowed hard. I've patched up soldiers in combat, but I've never delivered puppies. The principles aren't that different, Doctor, Reyes said with a gentleness in her voice. You're helping a life bring other lives into the world. I'll talk you through it when the time comes. For now, keep her warm, comfortable, and try to clean that gash on her leg. Do you have a first aid kit? Military grade, Jack replied, already moving to the cabinet where he kept his supplies. Good. Use the antiseptic, clean the wound, and bandage it lightly. Then call me back immediately if her condition changes or when labor begins. I'll stay by the phone all night. After hanging up, Jack knelt beside Luna. Looks like it's just you and me, girl, he whispered, stroking her head. But we're going to get through this together. As Jack cleaned Luna's wounds, he couldn't help but wonder about her story. Her paws were raw, suggesting she had traveled far. The gash on her leg looked like it might have come from barbed wire or a fence. She had been running from something or someone. And then there was her condition. Abandoned because of unwanted puppies? It made his blood boil to think someone could be so cruel. Luna whimpered as he applied the antiseptic, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned slightly into his touch, as if thanking him. Jack found himself talking to her, the words flowing after years of silence in the cabin. My wife, Eleanor, she loved dogs, he told Luna as he worked. Always wanted a German Shepherd, but we moved around too much with my deployments. Then, when we finally settled here, his voice caught. Well, she got sick, and priorities changed. Luna's amber eyes seemed to understand every word. Jack finished bandaging her leg and refilled her water bowl. He then made a quick meal of leftover stew meat and rice, which Luna ate hungrily, despite her condition. It was a good sign. She had fight in her. The night grew deeper, and the storm outside intensified. Jack made himself a pot of strong coffee, knowing sleep was not an option tonight. He sat on the floor beside Luna's makeshift bed, stroking her fur rhythmically. For the first time in 3 years, the cabin didn't feel empty or cold. There was life here, vulnerable life that needed him. Around midnight, Luna's breathing changed. She became restless, turning in circles on the blankets, whining softly. Jack recognized the signs immediately. Labor was beginning. With steady hands that belied his racing heart, he dialed Dr. Reyes again. "She's starting," he said simply when she answered. "Okay, Jack, you can do this. Put me on speaker and keep your hands free." For the next 2 hours, Jack followed Dr. Reyes' instructions meticulously. Luna struggled, her eyes filled with pain and confusion, but she seemed to draw strength from Jack's calm presence. When the first puppy finally emerged, a tiny, wet bundle of dark fur, Jack's heart nearly stopped. With the gentle hands, he cleared the membrane from the puppy's face and rubbed its tiny body with a clean towel as Dr. Reyes instructed. "Come on, little one," he whispered urgently. "Breathe." For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then the puppy gave a tiny squeak and began to move. Jack laughed in relief, tears springing to his eyes. He carefully placed the puppy near Luna, who immediately began to lick her firstborn. "First one's out and breathing," he reported to Dr. Reyes, his voice thick with emotion. "Great job, Jack. There should be more coming. Watch for the next one." 3 more puppies followed over the next hour, each delivery a small miracle in Jack's hands. 3 strong, healthy puppies, squirming and squeaking beside their exhausted mother. Jack felt a pride he hadn't experienced since his days of saving lives on the battlefield. As dawn approached, with the snowstorm finally beginning to subside, Luna and her 4 puppies slept peacefully by the fire. Jack sat beside them, exhausted but unable to look away from the new family in his living room. Dr. Reyes had finally signed off, promising to try to reach him later that day when the roads were cleared. Jack was about to close his eyes for a brief rest when a 5th puppy, significantly smaller than the others, began to emerge. Luna was too exhausted to push effectively, and the puppy wasn't moving. "No, no, no," Jack murmured, his medic instincts taking over. Without Dr. Reyes on the line, he was on his own. Drawing on decades of emergency medical experience, Jack carefully helped ease the tiny puppy out. It wasn't breathing, its little body still and blue. Jack's training kicked in fully. He cleared the puppy's airways with a gentle finger, then began the tiniest, most delicate CPR he had ever performed. A small breath into the puppy's nose and mouth, then 2 fingers pressing ever so gently on its chest. 1 breath, 2 compressions. 1 breath, 2 compressions. "Come on, fight," he whispered fiercely. "Your mama fought to get you here, now you fight too." For what seemed like an eternity, nothing happened. Jack continued, tears streaming down his face now. He couldn't lose this one. Not after everything Luna had endured to bring her babies to safety. Then, like a miracle, the tiny puppy shuddered and gave the faintest of squeaks. Jack gasped, continuing the gentle stimulation until the puppy began to move on its own, its color slowly returning. It was the smallest of the litter. A little female with a white star-shaped mark on her chest. "That's it, little star," Jack whispered, using the name that had instantly come to mind. "You're a fighter, just like your mama." He placed the tiny puppy next to Luna, who immediately began cleaning her smallest baby despite her exhaustion. Jack watched in wonder as Star, against all odds, began to nurse alongside her siblings. Outside, the storm had passed, and the first light of dawn painted the snow-covered landscape in soft pinks and golds. Jack Morgan, who had gone to bed the previous night a lonely old veteran, now sat surrounded by new life, a mother dog and 5 puppies who owed their lives to him. As he gently stroked Luna's head, a sudden knock at the door startled both of them. Luna tensed. a low, protective growl forming in her throat despite her weakened state. Jack frowned. Visitors were rare in this remote area, especially after a snowstorm. "Easy, girl," he murmured to Luna. "I'll check who it is." Jack rose stiffly, his body reminding him that he'd spent the night on the floor attending to a dog giving birth. He moved cautiously to the door and opened it to find a tall man in his 30s standing on the porch. The stranger was dressed in expensive winter gear, his luxury SUV somehow having made it through the barely plowed roads. "Can I help you?" Jack asked, immediately wary of the man's appearance. The stranger's eyes were cold, calculating. "I believe you have my dog." Jack stiffened, instantly protective. Behind him, he could hear Luna's low growl intensifying. "Your dog?" he questioned, deliberately keeping his body positioned to block the doorway. "The dog I found was collapsed in the snow, injured, and about to give birth. She could have died out there." The man's face remained impassive. "Name's Victor Hargrove. I own Hargrove Estates, the property that borders yours to the north." He gestured vaguely behind him. "That German Shepherd is a valuable breeding dog. She ran off during the storm yesterday. I've been looking for her since." Something in Victor's tone sent warning signals through Jack's mind. During his military career, he had developed a keen sense for detecting lies, and this man was hiding something. "Do you have any proof she's yours?" Jack asked calmly, though his heart was pounding. Victor's expression hardened. "I don't need to prove anything to you, old man. That's my dog, and those are my puppies. They're worth a lot of money. Pure German Shepherd bloodline." Jack didn't move from the doorway. "She doesn't have a collar or tags, no microchip that I could feel, and she was in pretty bad shape when I found her. Dogs escape. They get injured. Doesn't change who they belong to." Victor took a step forward, his expensive boots crunching in the snow. "Look, I appreciate you taking her in for the night, but I'll be taking her and the pups now. I can compensate you for your trouble." He reached for his wallet. Jack felt a surge of anger. This man talked about Luna like she was property, not a living being who had fought so hard for her babies. Behind him, Jack could hear the puppies squeaking, and Luna's growl had turned into a series of anxious whines. She was trying to stand to protect her puppies despite her exhaustion. "She's not in any condition to be moved," Jack said firmly. "She just gave birth a few hours ago, and the smallest pup nearly didn't make it. They need rest and veterinary care." Victor's eyes narrowed. "I have connections with the best vets in the county. They'll be fine." As they stood in tense silence, Jack noticed something he hadn't seen at first: a thin, partially healed scar running along Victor's right hand, the type of mark that might come from a defensive bite. "What happened to your hand?" Jack asked suddenly. Victor instinctively covered his right hand with his left. "Accident at work. Not that it's any of your business." His eyes darted past Jack, trying to get a better look at Luna. "I don't have time for this. That dog and her puppies are my property, and I'm taking them now." He tried to push past Jack, but despite his age, Jack held his ground. 22 years in the military had given him a strength that hadn't faded entirely. "I've called the vet," Jack said, his voice deadly calm. "Dr. Reyes at Pine Creek Emergency Veterinary Services. She knows about this dog's condition and is expecting to check on her today. I'm sure she'd be interested to hear about the dog's owner, who left her out in a blizzard while pregnant." Victor's face flushed with anger. "You're making a mistake, old man. You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Jack replied, years of facing down threats giving his voice an authority that made Victor hesitate. "A man who values money over the life of an animal. Now, I suggest you leave my property before I call the sheriff." The roads might be bad, but Tanner always makes it through for emergencies. The mention of Sheriff Tanner seemed to give Victor pause. His jaw clenched as he took a step back. "This isn't over," he said coldly. "You're keeping what doesn't belong to you." "We'll let the proper authorities decide that," Jack replied steadily. "Good day, Mr. Hargrove." Victor turned and stalked back to his vehicle, slamming the door before driving away, his SUV fishtailing slightly on the snow-covered road. Jack closed the door and leaned against it, his heart racing. Luna had managed to drag herself to the edge of her blanket nest, her body positioned protectively in front of her puppies despite her weakness. Her eyes met Jack's, filled with fear and gratitude. "It's okay, girl," he soothed, returning to kneel beside her. "He's gone now. You're safe." But Jack knew this wasn't over. A man like Victor Hargrove wouldn't give up easily, especially if the puppies were as valuable as he claimed. Jack reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in a long time. "Sheriff's office, this is Tanner," a gruff voice answered. "Tanner, it's Jack Morgan." "Jack, haven't heard from you in ages. Everything okay out your way after that storm?" Jack hesitated, then told Tanner everything, finding Luna, the birth of the puppies, and Victor Hargrove's visit. Sheriff Tanner listened without interrupting. "Hargrove, huh?" Tanner said when Jack finished. "That tracks. We've had complaints about his breeding operation before, but nothing that stuck. Animal welfare checked it out once, but he got tipped off beforehand and everything looked proper when they arrived." "So, you know him?" Jack asked. "Know of him. He moved here about 2 years ago, bought that big property north of you. Keeps to himself mostly, but throws his money and influence around town. Not well liked, but people are careful around him." Jack stroked Luna's head gently. "He wants her back, Tanner, and the puppies. But something's not right. You should have seen how terrified she was when she heard his voice." Tanner was quiet for a moment. "Roads are still being cleared, but I'll try to make it out your way this afternoon. In the meantime, you might want to contact Maggie Chen at Second Chance Animal Rescue. She knows the legal side of animal welfare cases better than anyone around here." After getting Maggie's number from Tanner, Jack made another call. Maggie answered on the second ring, her voice bright despite the early hour. "Jack Morgan, the Army medic who lives out on Willow Road? Sheriff Tanner mentioned you might call." Jack was surprised. "News travels fast." "Small town," Maggie replied with a chuckle. "Plus, Tanner and I work together often on animal cases. Now, tell me exactly what happened." Jack recounted the events again, describing Luna's condition when he found her, the difficult birth, and Victor's claim of ownership. Without a microchip or registration papers, it's going to be his word against the evidence of neglect and possible abuse, Maggie said thoughtfully. "The fact that she was injured and abandoned during a blizzard while pregnant works in our favor. Can you take photos of her injuries and condition? Document everything." "Already did," Jack said. "Military habit. Document the situation." "Perfect. Now, here's what we're going to do. I'm sending our volunteer veterinarian doctor, Maya Patel, to your place as soon as the main roads are passable. She'll examine the dog and puppies, provide proper medical care, and, most importantly, document their condition officially. Meanwhile, I'll file an emergency protective order to prevent Hargrove from taking them while we investigate." Relief washed over Jack. "Thank you, Maggie." "Don't thank me yet," she warned. "Men like Hargrove are used to getting their way. This could get messy. Are you sure you want to be involved?" Jack looked at Luna, who had relaxed enough to nurse her puppies again. The tiny one, Star, was fighting for her share of milk, her little body pressed against her mother's belly. "I'm sure," he said firmly. I've been in worse fights for less important causes." After ending the call with Maggie, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. He refreshed Luna's water and offered her more food, which she ate eagerly. The puppies were nursing well, even little Star, though Jack kept a close eye on her. As the morning progressed, Jack took more detailed photos of Luna's condition. The gash on her leg, the raw paws, the signs of previous injuries that had healed poorly. He noted how thin she was beneath her thick fur, suggesting longer-term neglect. Each observation made him more determined to protect her. Around noon, as Jack was dozing lightly in his armchair, a sound outside snapped him fully awake. Luna was instantly alert too, her ears perked despite her exhaustion. Jack moved quietly to the window and peered out. It wasn't Victor returning. Instead, a battered pickup truck was making its way carefully up his long driveway. The truck had "Second Chance Animal Rescue" painted on the side. Relief flooded through Jack as he watched a small, confident woman in a veterinarian's jacket exit the truck, medical bag in hand. Dr. Patel had arrived. Jack opened the door before she could knock. "Dr. Patel, thank you for coming." The veterinarian smiled, her dark eyes warm and intelligent. "Call me Maya. Maggie filled me in on the situation." She stamped the snow from her boots before entering. "Where's our patient?" Jack led her to Luna, who watched the newcomer warily. Maya knelt at a respectful distance, speaking softly to the dog. "Hello, beautiful. You've had quite an adventure, haven't you?" She looked up at Jack. "What have you named her?" "Luna," Jack replied, surprised at himself. He hadn't realized he'd started thinking of the name as permanent. Maya smiled approvingly. "Perfect. And the puppies?" Jack pointed to each one as they nursed. "I haven't named the others yet, except for the smallest one. That's Star. She was born last and wasn't breathing. Had to resuscitate her." Maya's eyebrows rose. "You performed puppy CPR?" "Army medic," Jack said by way of explanation. "The principles aren't that different." "Impressive," Maya said, beginning to unpack her medical supplies. "May I examine them?" Jack nodded, and Maya spent the next hour thoroughly examining Luna and each puppy. She cleaned Luna's wounds properly, administered antibiotics and vaccines, checked for a microchip, there was none, and assessed the overall health of each puppy. "They're remarkably healthy considering the circumstances," Maya concluded, stroking Star gently. "Luna is malnourished and has several old injuries that suggest mistreatment, but she's strong. And these puppies, they're fighters, especially this little one." She handed Jack a bottle with specialized puppy formula. "You'll want to supplement Star's feeding. She's too small and might not be getting enough milk when competing with her siblings." Jack listened carefully as Maya explained how to bottle feed a newborn puppy. It was yet another skill he never imagined needing, but he absorbed the instructions with the same focus he'd once given to field medical training. As Maya packed up her supplies, her expression grew serious. "Jack, Maggie told me about Victor Hargrove. I've heard rumors about his breeding operation. Too many dogs, poor conditions, minimal veterinary care. If Luna escaped from there, it was probably her best chance at survival." "He'll be back," Jack said grimly. Maya nodded. "Probably. But we're building a case. My medical report will document evidence of long-term neglect. Combined with the circumstances in which you found her, abandoned in a blizzard while in labor, we have grounds to deny his claim of ownership, even if he can somehow prove she came from his property." A loud vehicle engine interrupted their conversation. Jack moved quickly to the window, tension returning to his body. It wasn't Victor's SUV this time, but Sheriff Tanner's official vehicle, its chains helping it navigate the snowy road. "That's Tanner," Jack said, relief evident in his voice. The sheriff entered a few minutes later, stamping snow from his boots and nodding to Dr. Patel. "Maya, should have known Maggie would send you out here already." His eyes moved to Luna and the puppies. "So, this is our mama dog. Hargrove's been raising quite a fuss in town, claiming you stole his prize breeding female, Jack." Jack's jaw tightened. "You know that's not what happened." Tanner held up a hand. "Of course I do. Just telling you what he's saying." He knelt to look at Luna, who seemed to accept his presence after a cautious sniff. "Beautiful animal. German shepherds were always my favorite." "Sheriff," Maya said formally, "I've completed my examination, and I'll be submitting my findings to Maggie for the protective order. In my professional opinion, this dog has suffered neglect and possible abuse over an extended period. Her condition is consistent with Jack's account of finding her abandoned during the storm." Tanner nodded, his expression becoming more serious. "That helps. Hargrove has influence, but documented veterinary evidence carries weight." He turned to Jack. "There's something else you should know. After Hargrove left your place, he went straight into town and hired Randall Matthews." Jack frowned. "The lawyer?" "The very expensive lawyer," Tanner corrected. "Matthews specializes in property disputes, and in Hargrove's eyes, that dog and her puppies are property worth fighting for." Maya's phone buzzed. She checked it and broke into a smile. "Good news. Maggie just got the emergency protective order approved. Hargrove can't legally remove Luna or the puppies from Jack's care until a hearing determines proper ownership." She looked at Jack. "That buys us some time." As if understanding they were discussing her fate, Luna whined softly and pulled Star closer to her with a gentle paw. The sight strengthened Jack's resolve. After years of feeling purposeless, he suddenly had someone worth fighting for. "So what happens now?" he asked. Tanner sighed. "Now it gets complicated. The protective order is temporary, just until a proper hearing. Hargrove will present his case for ownership and will present evidence of neglect and abandonment. Judge Williams is fair, but this type of case can go either way." "When is the hearing?" Jack asked. "Next Wednesday," Maya replied, reading from her phone. "Maggie's setting everything up." Jack nodded, already mentally preparing for the fight ahead. A week wasn't long, but it was enough time to ensure Luna and her puppies were stronger and to gather more evidence against Hargrove. After Tanner and Maya left, promising to return soon, Jack sat beside Luna's makeshift bed. The German shepherd looked up at him, her amber eyes filled with a trust he hadn't seen directed at him in years. One by one, her puppies had finished nursing and were sleeping in a pile of tiny, warm bodies. "We're going to fight for you," Jack promised softly, gently stroking Luna's head. "All of you." As the day faded into evening, Jack periodically checked on the puppies, making sure Star was nursing adequately. When she seemed to struggle, he prepared the formula as Maya had shown him and carefully fed the tiny puppy with the special bottle. Star took to it eagerly, her little paws batting at the air as she drank. That night, Jack pulled his old cot into the living room so he could sleep near Luna and the puppies. As he drifted off, he realized the oppressive silence of the cabin had been replaced by the soft sounds of puppy breaths and occasional dream whimpers. For the first time since Eleanor had passed away, Jack Morgan didn't feel alone. The next few days fell into a new routine. Jack cared for Luna, helping her regain her strength with nutritious meals and gentle exercise around the cabin. He supplemented Star's feeding every few hours, day and night, watching with satisfaction as the runt of the litter slowly became more vigorous. He also began naming the other puppies, Thunder for the largest male with his booming puppy barks, Shadow for the darkest female who liked to follow Jack everywhere, Scout for the curious male who was always exploring, and Star for the smallest female with her distinctive white marking. News of Jack's rescue of Luna and her puppies spread quickly through the small community of Pine Creek. Neighbors he barely knew started arriving with supplies, puppy food, blankets, toys, and offers of help. Jack, who had lived as a near hermit for years, suddenly found his days filled with visitors and conversation. Maggie, from the rescue, visited daily, helping build their case against Hargrove, while also teaching Jack about caring for newborn puppies. Dr. Maya checked on the puppy's development, expressing particular pride in Star's progress. "She's a fighter," Maya said warmly as she watched Star, now noticeably stronger, wrestle with her brother Scout. Just like her rescuer. Amid this newfound community, Jack received an unexpected phone call 5 days after finding Luna. It was his daughter, Sarah, calling from Europe for their weekly chat. "Dad, what's all that noise in the background? It sounds like puppies." Jack laughed, realizing how much had changed in just a few days. "You might want to sit down for this story, Sarah Bear." He hadn't used her childhood nickname in years. He told her everything: finding Luna, delivering the puppies, the confrontation with Hargrove, and the upcoming hearing. Sarah listened in astonished silence. "Dad, that's incredible," she finally said. "You delivered puppies? You're bottle-feeding the runt? Who are you, and what have you done with my father?" Jack chuckled. "I'm asking myself the same question." "I'm booking a flight," Sarah said suddenly, determination in her voice. "I want to meet Luna and the puppies, and I want to be there for this hearing." "Sarah, you don't need to. Dad, this is the first time in 3 years you've sounded truly alive." "Of course I'm coming." After hanging up, Jack felt a warmth spread through him. His daughter was coming home, something that hadn't happened since the funeral. Luna, sensing his emotion, limped over and rested her head on his knee, looking up with those understanding amber eyes. "We've started something big here, Luna," he whispered, scratching behind her ears. "And I think it's healing more than just you and your puppies." The day before the hearing, Sarah arrived, her eyes filling with tears when she saw her father, not sitting alone in his chair as she had left him, but on the floor surrounded by puppies, with Luna resting contentedly at his side. "Dad," she whispered, dropping her bags and kneeling beside him. Luna regarded the newcomer cautiously until Jack's obvious acceptance of Sarah reassured her. Sarah gently stroked Luna's head, then picked up Star, who had become the most sociable of the puppies despite her small size. "She's perfect," Sarah said softly, cradling the puppy. "They all are." That evening, as Sarah helped prepare dinner, she watched her father move around the cabin with a purpose and energy she hadn't seen since before her mother's illness. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "Mom would have loved this. You, saving a dog and her puppies, standing up to some rich bully, becoming the talk of the town." Jack paused, a sad smile crossing his face. "She always wanted a dog." "She wanted you to have a dog," Sarah corrected gently. "After she was gone. She told me once that she worried about you being alone out here." Jack's eyes misted over. She always was, thinking ahead for everyone else. Luna, who had been watching them from her bed near the fireplace, rose stiffly and padded over to Jack, pressing against his leg as if sensing his sadness. Jack placed a hand on her head, drawing comfort from her presence. "I think she would approve of Luna," Sarah said, wiping away her own tears. "And I know she'd be proud of what you're doing tomorrow." The next morning dawned clear and cold. Jack dressed in his best clothes, the suit he had worn to Eleanor's funeral, now slightly loose on his frame. Sarah helped him adjust his tie, then knelt to say goodbye to Luna and the puppies. "We'll be back soon," she promised them, "and you'll be staying right here where you belong." As they drove toward the county courthouse, Sarah briefed Jack on what she had learned from Maggie about the hearing. Hargrove's lawyer will try to establish ownership first. Registration papers, purchase receipts, anything that links Luna to him. Then our side presents evidence of neglect and abandonment. Dr. Maya's testimony will be crucial. She's meeting us there, along with Maggie and Sheriff Tanner. Jack nodded, his expression determined. And if the judge rules in Hargrove's favor? Sarah hesitated. Maggie says we have options, appeals, further investigations into his breeding operation. We won't give up. The courthouse was busier than Jack expected. Word had spread about the case, and it seemed half the town had turned out. As Jack and Sarah made their way inside, people stopped to offer encouragement and support. "We're all behind you, Jack," Mrs. Peterson from the general store said firmly. "That man has no business with any animals." Inside the courtroom, Victor Hargrove sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, the expensive Randall Matthews. Hargrove looked confident, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than Jack's truck. He didn't acknowledge Jack's entrance. Maggie waved them over to where she sat with Dr. Maya and Sheriff Tanner. "Ready?" she asked quietly. "As I'll ever be," Jack replied. Judge Williams entered, and the proceedings began. Matthews went first, presenting documentation that a German Shepherd matching Luna's description had been purchased by Hargrove 2 years ago as a breeding female. He showed registration papers for Midnight Princess, along with photographs that did indeed look like Luna. "My client has invested considerable resources in his ethical breeding program," Matthews argued smoothly. The animal in question escaped during the storm due to a gate damaged by falling branches. Mr. Morgan is to be commended for providing temporary shelter, but the dog and her valuable puppies are legally the property of Mr. Hargrove. When it was their turn, Maggie presented Dr. Maya's medical evidence first. Maya took the stand and methodically detailed Luna's injuries, old and new, along with signs of malnourishment and stress. "In my professional opinion," Maya concluded firmly, "this dog has suffered prolonged neglect and possible physical abuse. Her condition was inconsistent with proper care, especially for a pregnant animal." Sheriff Tanner testified next, detailing the previous complaints about Hargrove's breeding facility and the suspicious timing of the animal welfare inspection that had found nothing amiss. Finally, it was Jack's turn to testify. As he took the stand, he felt a calm certainty settle over him. This was right. This was important. "Mr. Morgan," Maggie began, "please tell the court exactly how you found the dog you've named Luna." Jack described that snowy night, the sound that had drawn him to the door, finding Luna collapsed in the snow, her injuries, her desperate condition. He detailed the birth of the puppies, focusing especially on Star's difficult entry into the world and how he had resuscitated her. "And when Mr. Hargrove came to your home, what was Luna's reaction?" Maggie asked. "She was terrified," Jack stated firmly. "She tried to stand despite her weakness. She growled. The only time she's ever shown aggression. She was trying to protect her puppies from him." Matthews objected, claiming Jack couldn't know what the dog was thinking, but Jack continued steadily. "I spent 22 years as an Army medic. I've seen fear, I've seen trauma responses. Luna wasn't just afraid, she was terrified of that man. And when I pointed out the scar on his hand, he covered it up immediately." This caused a stir in the courtroom. Judge Williams asked Jack to elaborate. I believe it's a defensive bite mark, Your Honor. The kind that happens when an animal is being mistreated and fights back. Matthews jumped up. Speculation. My client works with many animals. Minor injuries are common. Mr. Morgan, Judge Williams said thoughtfully, in your professional medical opinion, having treated both humans and now animals, would you consider the German Shepherd known as Luna to be in danger if returned to Mr. Hargrove's custody? Jack looked directly at Victor Hargrove as he answered. Without question, Your Honor. Luna ran away during a blizzard, pregnant and already injured, rather than stay in his care. Animals don't make that choice lightly. She knew the danger outside was less than the danger she faced with him. The courtroom was silent as Jack returned to his seat. Sarah squeezed his hand proudly. Judge Williams called a brief recess to consider all the evidence. In the hallway, Victor Hargrove approached Jack, his lawyer trying unsuccessfully to restrain him. You have no idea what you're costing me, old man, Hargrove hissed. Those puppies are worth thousands each. The female alone isn't just a female, Jack interrupted calmly. Her name is Luna. She has feelings, fears, and preferences, and she chose to leave you, even if it meant risking death. Hargrove's face flushed with anger. Dogs don't choose anything. They're property, and you're a thief. Sheriff Tanner stepped between them. That's enough, Hargrove. Back off. When court resumed, Judge Williams delivered her ruling. This case presents complex questions about animal ownership and welfare, she began. While Mr. Hargrove has presented documentation suggesting he purchased the animal in question, the evidence of neglect and possible abuse cannot be ignored. She turned her gaze to Hargrove. Mr. Hargrove, I am denying your claim of ownership based on abandonment and evidence of improper care. Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate investigation of your breeding facility by state animal welfare officials. The judge then addressed Jack. Mr. Morgan, the court awards you temporary custody of the dog called Luna and her puppies, pending the results of the state investigation. Given the evidence presented today, I believe this arrangement will likely become permanent. The courtroom erupted in applause. Sarah hugged her father tightly, tears streaming down her face. Maggie and Maya were beaming. Even Sheriff Tanner allowed himself a rare smile. As for Victor Hargrove, he stormed out of the courtroom, his lawyer hurrying after him. Jack knew they hadn't seen the last of him, but for now, Luna and her puppies were safe. The drive home from the courthouse felt like a victory parade. Sarah chatted excitedly about plans for building proper beds for Luna and the puppies, while Jack quietly savored the relief that washed over him. They had won the first battle, but the war wasn't over. The judge's ruling was temporary, pending the state investigation. Still, it was more than he had dared hope for. When they pulled up to the cabin, Jack was surprised to see several vehicles parked outside. Maggie's rescue van was there, along with Doctor, Maya's truck, and several others he recognized from town. "What's all this?" he asked as they approached the cabin. Sarah smiled mysteriously. "I might have made a few calls while you were giving your statement." Inside, Jack found his normally quiet living room transformed. A group of neighbors had created a proper whelping box for Luna and her puppies using carpentry skills and donated materials. Others had brought dog food, puppy supplies, and even a small refrigerator specifically for storing puppy formula. Luna was contentedly watching the activity from her new bed, the puppies nursing or sleeping beside her. "We figured you could use some help getting set up properly," explained Tom Wilson, the hardware store owner who had barely spoken 10 words to Jack in the 3 years since Eleanor's funeral. "Can't have our town hero making do with blankets on the floor." Jack was speechless, moved by the community's support. Mrs. Peterson from the general store pressed a casserole into his hands. "There's more in the freezer. You focus on those puppies. We'll make sure you're all fed." That evening, after everyone had left and the cabin was quiet again, Jack and Sarah sat on the floor beside Luna's new whelping box. Star had finished her supplemental bottle feeding and was curled up against Jack's leg, tiny paws twitching in puppy dreams. "You know," Sarah said softly, "I was worried about you out here all alone. After Mom died, you just withdrew. I called every week, but it was like talking to a shadow of my dad." Jack nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. "I didn't know how to live without her." "And now?" Jack looked at Luna, who gazed back with those soulful amber eyes. "Now I have a reason to get up every morning. 5 reasons, actually." He gently stroked Star's small body. 6, counting this little fighter. Sarah leaned against her father's shoulder like she used to do as a child. "Mom would be so proud of you." "For taking in strays?" Jack asked with a small smile. "For finding your heart again," Sarah replied. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Sheriff Tanner's cruiser pulled up the driveway, but it wasn't only Tanner who stepped out. A tall woman in a crisp suit followed him, her official ID badge visible even from the window. "Jack," Tanner said when they entered, "this is Agent Rebecca Lawson from the State Bureau of Animal Welfare. She's leading the investigation into Hargrove's breeding operation." Agent Lawson shook Jack's hand firmly. "Mr. Morgan, I've heard a lot about you and Luna. Do you mind if I see her and the puppies?" Jack led her to the whelping box, where Luna raised her head alertly but remained calm. Agent Lawson knelt at a respectful distance, her experienced eyes assessing the dog and her puppies. "She's a beautiful animal," Lawson commented. "German Shepherds are intelligent, loyal dogs. I'm not surprised she sought help when she needed it most." "What happens now?" Jack asked, as Sarah brought coffee for everyone. Agent Lawson accepted the mug gratefully. "Based on Judge Williams' ruling and the evidence presented in court, we've obtained a warrant to inspect Hargrove's entire property. My team is there now." She paused, her expression becoming more serious. "I should warn you, Hargrove isn't taking this lying down. He's already filed an appeal and is making noise about suing you for defamation." Tanner snorted. "Good luck with that. Half the town was in that courtroom, and they all heard the vet's testimony." "Still," Lawson continued, "men like Hargrove are used to using their money and influence to get what they want. The fact that he's been challenged publicly makes him dangerous." Jack nodded, unsurprised. "I've dealt with dangerous men before." "Which brings me to another reason for my visit," Lawson said, reaching into her briefcase. She pulled out several photographs, laying them on the coffee table. "These were taken at Hargrove's property 6 months ago, during a routine inspection that found no violations. I want you to look at them carefully." The photos showed German Shepherds in clean kennels, well-fed and apparently healthy. But one image caught Jack's eye. A female that looked remarkably like Luna, though healthier and without the scar on her muzzle she now had. "That's her, isn't it?" Lawson asked, noting Jack's reaction. "I think so. Hard to be certain, but the markings are similar." Lawson nodded. "We think so too. Now look at this." She pulled out another photo, this one taken from social media. "This is from Hargrove's breeding business website 3 months ago, advertising puppies from his prize female." The photo showed the same dog, now noticeably pregnant and thinner, with the beginning of the scar that Luna now carried. Jack felt a surge of anger. She was already being neglected then. Yes, but it was just starting, subtle enough that most people wouldn't notice in a promotional photo. The real question is what happened between then and when you found her. Lawson tapped the photo thoughtfully. Hargrove reported her missing 4 days before you found her, claiming she escaped during the storm. But the storm had only been raging for 2 days when she showed up at your door. She was running for longer than he claimed, Sarah realized, leaning forward. Exactly, Lawson confirmed. And that gash on her leg, Dr. Patel said it was at least 3 days old when she examined Luna. Timeline doesn't match Hargrove's story. Sheriff Tanner, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. You think he's hiding something bigger? Lawson nodded grimly. I think Luna isn't the only dog that suffered at Hargrove Estates, and I think she might be the key to uncovering what's really happening there. Jack looked at Luna, who was watching the conversation with intelligent eyes. What do you need from us? For now, just keep doing what you're doing, taking care of Luna and the puppies. Document everything, her recovery, her behavior, especially any signs of trauma or fear. It could be crucial evidence. Lawson gathered the photos, returning them to her briefcase. I'll be in touch as soon as my team completes the inspection. After Lawson and Tanner left, Sarah turned to her father, concern etched on her face. Dad, this sounds like it's becoming something much bigger than just saving one dog. Jack nodded slowly. It always was. Luna found me for a reason, Sarah Bear, and I think we're just beginning to understand what that reason might be. Over the next few days, life settled into a new routine. The puppies grew stronger daily, their eyes beginning to open, their personalities emerging more clearly. Thunder was bold and vocal, always the first to demand attention. Shadow remained Jack's quiet shadow, following him everywhere she could manage to crawl. Scout lived up to his name, constantly exploring the boundaries of the whelping box. And Star, though still the smallest, displayed a determination that impressed everyone who met her. Sarah extended her stay, unable to tear herself away from the puppies and, though she wouldn't admit it aloud, relieved to see her father engaged with life again. She worked remotely from the cabin, setting up a small office in the spare bedroom, and helped Jack care for Luna and the puppies. A week after the hearing doctor, Maya arrived for her regular checkup of the little family. She examined each puppy carefully, nodding with satisfaction at their development. They're all thriving, she announced, scratching Thunder behind his tiny ears. Even Star is catching up. You've done an amazing job, Jack. Jack shrugged, embarrassed by the praise. Luna's the one doing the hard work? Maya smiled, moving to examine Luna next. The German Shepherd had grown comfortable with Maya's visits and submitted to the examination with patient dignity. As Maya checked Luna's healing wounds, she paused, her expression becoming puzzled. That's strange, she murmured, parting Luna's fur along her back. What is it? Jack asked, immediately concerned. Maya pointed to a small raised area on Luna's shoulder blade. This feels like something embedded under her skin. It's not a microchip. That would be at the base of the neck. She peered closer. There's a tiny scar here, almost healed. Sarah moved closer. Could it be some kind of tracking device? Maya looked up, her eyes widening. It's possible. Some breeders use subcutaneous GPS trackers for their most valuable animals. Jack's blood ran cold. If it's a tracker, Hargrove could know exactly where she is, has been all along. We need to remove it, Maya said firmly. I can do it here. It's a simple procedure, but we should preserve it as evidence. While Maya prepared her surgical tools, Jack called Sheriff Tanner, explaining what they'd found. Tanner promised to alert Agent Lawson immediately. In the meantime, Tanner advised, keep a close eye out. If Hargrove has been tracking Luna, he might make a move now that the court has ruled against him. The procedure to remove the tracker was quick, with Luna stoically enduring the minor surgery under the local anesthetic. Maya placed the tiny device, no larger than a grain of rice, in a sterile container. "I'll take this directly to Agent Lawson," she said, packing up her supplies. "In the meantime, be careful, Jack. Hargrove isn't going to give up easily." That evening, Jack insisted on taking the first watch while Sarah got some rest. He sat in his armchair with Luna's whelping box positioned where he could see it clearly, his old service pistol within reach on the side table. Luna seemed to sense his vigilance, remaining awake beside her puppies instead of sleeping. Around midnight, Luna's ears suddenly perked up. She rose to her feet, a low growl building in her throat. Jack was instantly alert, hand moving to his weapon. Outside, he heard the crunch of tires on snow, someone driving with headlights off, approaching the cabin slowly. Jack moved silently to the window, peering out into the darkness. A black SUV had stopped at the edge of his property. Two figures emerged, moving stealthily toward the cabin. Jack recognized the taller one immediately, Victor Hargrove. The second man was unfamiliar, bulkier, moving with the confidence of someone used to physical confrontation. "Sarah," Jack called softly, not taking his eyes from the window. "We have company." Sarah appeared at his side, her face paling as she spotted the intruders. "I'll call Tanner," she whispered, moving toward her phone. "Tell him to hurry," Jack replied grimly, "and then take Luna and the puppies to the back bedroom. Lock the door and don't open it for anyone but me." As Sarah hurriedly gathered the puppies, placing them in a laundry basket lined with blankets, Jack checked his pistol and positioned himself near the front door. Luna, however, refused to follow Sarah, planting herself firmly beside Jack, her hackles raised, and a continuous growl emanating from her throat. "Go with Sarah, girl," Jack urged, but Luna stood her ground, clearly unwilling to leave his side. Sarah paused at the hallway. "Dad, please be careful." Jack nodded. "Go. Now." Outside, the two men had reached the porch. Jack could hear their hushed voices through the door. "Remember, get the dog and the puppies. Morgan is expendable," Hargrove was saying. "Make it look like a break-in gone wrong." Jack felt a cold fury settle over him. This wasn't just about stealing back Luna. Hargrove was willing to eliminate anyone who stood in his way. Jack positioned himself behind his heavy oak sideboard, giving himself cover while maintaining a clear line of sight to the door. The lock jiggled slightly, someone trying to pick it. Luna's growl intensified, but Jack placed a calming hand on her head. "Easy, girl, not yet." The door burst open with a splintering of wood. The bulky man entered first, a crowbar in one hand and what looked like a tranquilizer gun in the other. He spotted Jack immediately and raised the tranquilizer. "Don't move, old man," he growled. "We're just here for the dog." "The dog isn't property," Jack replied evenly, his pistol raised. "And you're trespassing." Hargrove stepped in behind his accomplice, a smug expression on his face. "You think that toy scares me? I own the sheriff's department in the next county. One call, and I can make anything that happens here tonight disappear." "Maybe," Jack acknowledged. "But you'll still be dead if you take another step." The standoff lasted for several tense seconds. Then Hargrove nodded slightly to his companion, who suddenly lunged toward Luna with the tranquilizer raised. Jack fired a warning shot into the ceiling, causing both intruders to freeze. "Next one won't be a warning," Jack stated calmly. "Now, back out of my house." Hargrove's face contorted with rage. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. That dog is worth more than your pathetic life. She's the key to everything." "The key to what?" Jack demanded, keeping his pistol steady. "None of your business, old man." The bulky accomplice snarled, shifting his weight subtly. Jack recognized the movement, a precursor to attack, and tensed. What happened next occurred so quickly that later, Jack could barely piece it together in sequence. The accomplice lunged, not at Luna, but at Jack himself. Luna launched forward with a ferocity Jack hadn't witnessed before, her teeth sinking into the attacker's arm. The man screamed, dropping both the crowbar and tranquilizer. Hargrove grabbed the fallen tranquilizer and fired wildly, the dart missing Luna but grazing Jack's shoulder. Despite the burning sensation where the dart had scraped him, Jack maintained his aim. "It's over, Hargrove. Drop it." "It's never over," Hargrove hissed, raising the tranquilizer again. A shot rang out, but not from Jack's weapon. Hargrove crumpled to the floor, clutching his leg. Behind him, Sheriff Tanner stood in the doorway, his service weapon drawn. "Nobody move," Tanner ordered. "Jack, you okay?" Jack nodded, though he was beginning to feel lightheaded from the partial tranquilizer dose. Luna had returned to his side, positioning herself protectively between Jack and the intruders, her muzzle stained with blood from the bite. "Check on Sarah and the puppies," Jack managed, fighting the growing drowsiness. As Tanner's deputies secured the scene, handcuffing both Hargrove and his accomplice, Maya and Maggie arrived, having been contacted by Sarah when she called for help. Maya rushed to Jack's side, quickly assessing his condition. "Partial dose of animal tranquilizer," she concluded, examining the graze on his shoulder. "You'll be groggy for a while, but it shouldn't be dangerous." Sarah emerged from the bedroom, the basket of puppies still in her arms. "Dad!" she cried, seeing Jack's pale face. "I'm okay," he assured her, though his words slurred slightly. "Luna protected me." Luna, having confirmed that the threat was neutralized, moved to check on her puppies, sniffing each one carefully as Sarah placed the basket down. Satisfied that they were unharmed, she returned to Jack's side, resting her head on his lap as he sat heavily in his armchair. Agent Lawson arrived shortly after, surveying the scene with professional detachment. She knelt beside the cursing, bleeding Hargrove. "Victor Hargrove, you're under arrest for breaking and entering, attempted theft, assault, and conspiracy to commit murder," she stated. "And those are just the charges from tonight. We've found quite a collection of evidence at your breeding facility." Hargrove spat on the floor. "You've got nothing. I have rights. I want my lawyer." "Oh, you'll need one," Lawson agreed coldly. "We found 3 more tracking devices identical to the one removed from Luna today. We also found medical records indicating experimental breeding practices, illegal surgical modifications, and evidence of animals disposed of when they didn't meet your standards." She stood, nodding to the deputies to take Hargrove away. "By the way, your accomplice here, Jason Miller, has quite a record. Assault, animal cruelty, illegal disposal of biological waste. I wonder how eager he'll be to protect you once he realizes the years he's facing." After the intruders had been taken away and the paramedics had checked Jack's condition, confirming that the tranquilizer would wear off without lasting effects, Agent Lawson sat across from Jack in the living room. Luna remained pressed against his leg, unwilling to leave his side even momentarily. "You were right about Luna being the key," Lawson said, accepting the coffee Sarah offered. Hargrove wasn't just running a breeding operation. He was experimenting with genetic modifications, trying to create superior German shepherds that he could sell to security firms and even military contractors for enormous profit. "Luna was part of this?" Jack asked, his voice stronger as the effects of the tranquilizer gradually diminished. Lawson nodded. "She was one of his successes. A dog with exceptional intelligence, stamina, and loyalty. According to the records we found, Her litter was supposed to be his breakthrough. Puppies that could be trained for specialized work worth tens of thousands each. That's why he was so desperate to get them back, Sarah realized. It wasn't just about losing valuable dogs, it was about losing his research subjects. Exactly, Lawson confirmed. But Luna had other ideas. From what we can piece together, she escaped intentionally, breaking through a section of fencing that had been weakened by a previous escape attempt. She wasn't just saving herself, she was saving her puppies from becoming experiments. Jack looked down at Luna with newfound appreciation. She chose where her puppies would be born. She chose who would care for them. And she chose well. Maya added softly from where she sat monitoring the puppies. These little ones will never know the fate Hargrove had planned for them. They'll be normal, beloved dogs, thanks to their mother's courage and your compassion. In the weeks that followed, the full story of Hargrove's operation unfolded in court proceedings and news reports. Additional charges were filed as more evidence emerged of animal cruelty, illegal experimental breeding, and tax evasion. Several other dogs were rescued from the facility, though none in as poor condition as Luna had been. Hargrove had reserved his worst treatment for those who resisted or failed to meet his standards. Luna and her puppies thrived under Jack and Sarah's care. The puppies grew quickly, their personalities becoming more distinct with each passing day. Thunder lived up to his name, developing a deep, booming bark that echoed through the cabin. Shadow remained Jack's faithful companion, always nearby, watching quietly. Scout became increasingly adventurous, requiring secure fencing to contain his explorations. And Star, though still the smallest, displayed an intelligence and adaptability that amazed everyone who met her. As the puppies reached 8 weeks old, the question of their future became more pressing. Sarah, who had extended her stay indefinitely by arranging to work remotely long-term, raised the subject one evening as they watched the puppies play in the yard. "They'll need homes soon," she said gently, knowing how attached her father had become to all of them. Jack nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about that." He looked at Luna, who sat contentedly beside him, watching her growing puppies with maternal pride. "Luna stays with me, of course. As for the puppies," he paused. "I'd like to keep Star." Sarah smiled. "I suspected as much. You two have a special bond." "What about you?" Jack asked. "You've become quite attached to them yourself." Sarah's eyes followed Shadow, who was attempting to herd her more rambunctious siblings. "I've been thinking about moving back to Pine Creek," she admitted. "My company has approved permanent remote work, and—" She hesitated. "I've missed being home. Missed you." Jack felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I'd like that. And Shadow would too, I think." Sarah's face lit up. "Really? I can keep Shadow?" "If you're staying nearby, absolutely," Jack confirmed. "That leaves Thunder and Scout to place." As if on cue, a vehicle pulled into the driveway, Dr. Maya's truck. She had continued her regular visits to check on the puppy's development, becoming a friend along the way. Today, however, she wasn't alone. Sheriff Tanner stepped out of the passenger side looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Hope we're not interrupting," Maya called as they approached. "We wanted to talk to you about something." Inside, over coffee, Maya explained their visit. "You'll be making decisions about the puppies soon, and, well—" She glanced at Tanner, who cleared his throat awkwardly. "My old K-9 partner retired last month," Tanner said, getting straight to the point. "Departments approved a new dog, but the waiting list for trained police dogs is over a year. Maya suggested that maybe Scout might have the right temperament for training." Jack looked at Scout, who was currently attempting to disassemble a toy with focused determination. He's certainly got the curiosity and drive for it. He'd need professional training, of course, Tanner added quickly, but he'd be with me, serving the community, and you could see him any time. Jack nodded slowly. I think Scout would make an excellent police dog. He'd be following in his mother's footsteps in a way, protecting others. Tanner's relief was palpable. Thank you, Jack. I promise he'll be well cared for. And what about Thunder? Sarah asked. We still need a home for him. Maya hesitated, then spoke. Actually, that's the other reason I'm here. My therapy dog outreach program at the Children's Hospital has been so successful that we're expanding it. Thunder's confidence and gentle playfulness would make him perfect for work with kids. I'd train him myself. Jack looked at Thunder, who was currently sprawled on his back, legs in the air, enjoying a belly rub from Sarah. Despite his name, he was the gentlest of the litter, always careful with his strength around his smaller siblings. Another service dog, Jack mused. Luna would be proud. The decision made, they toasted the puppy's futures. Jack found himself surprisingly content with the arrangements. Each puppy would have a purpose, a home where they were valued not for their genetics or breeding potential, but for their unique personalities and the joy they brought to people's lives. That night, as Jack settled into his armchair with Luna at his feet and Star curled in his lap, he reflected on the extraordinary turn his life had taken. 3 months ago, he had been a lonely widower, existing rather than living in his isolated cabin. Now, his home was filled with life, his days with purpose, and his heart with love again. Sarah entered the living room, Shadow trotting faithfully behind her. She had signed a lease on a small house just a mile down the road, close enough to visit daily, but giving them both the independence they needed. I spoke with Agent Lawson today, she said, settling into the chair opposite her father. Hargrove's case is proceeding. With the evidence they've gathered and his attempted break-in here, he's facing serious prison time. Jack nodded, scratching Star behind her ears. The smallest puppy had grown into a confident young dog, her white, star-shaped marking now more pronounced against her darkening coat. And the other dogs from his facility, all placed in fostering situations while the case proceeds. Maggie's shelter has been coordinating with rescue groups across the state. Sarah smiled at Shadow, who had claimed a spot at her feet, mirroring Luna's position beside Jack. It's becoming quite the success story. Luna's story, Jack corrected gently. She's the one who changed everything. As if understanding she was being discussed, Luna raised her head, her amber eyes meeting Jack's with that same intelligence and trust he had seen on that snowy night when she had collapsed on his porch. In that moment, Jack Morgan knew with absolute certainty that they had saved each other. Outside, spring had come to Pine Creek. The snow had melted, revealing new growth and possibilities. And inside the once quiet cabin, a family had been born. Not of blood, but of choice, courage, and compassion. A retired Army medic, his daughter, and 3 German shepherds, each with their own story of survival and purpose. Luna had chosen well indeed. 1 year later, Jack sat on his expanded porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The cabin had undergone significant changes: a fenced yard for the dogs, renovated rooms, and a small addition that served as Sarah's home office when she came to work alongside her father. But the most profound changes weren't to the physical structure. They were to the lives within it. Luna lay beside Jack's chair, her coat glossy and healthy. The scars of her past now faded, but still visible reminders of her journey. At 3 years old, she had blossomed into a magnificent, dignified German shepherd, her amber eyes still holding that special intelligence that had guided her through the snowstorm to Jack's door on that fateful night. Star bounded across the yard, chasing a butterfly with playful determination. No longer the tiny, struggling runt who had needed CPR to take her first breath, she had grown into a medium-sized, agile dog whose white star marking on her chest had developed into a distinctive pattern that earned admiring comments wherever she went. Though smaller than typical German shepherds, what she lacked in size she made up for in personality and intelligence. "She never stops moving, does she?" Sarah remarked, bringing 2 mugs of coffee and settling into the chair beside her father. Shadow followed at her heels, as always, the quiet, loyal dog, having become Sarah's constant companion as she built her new life in Pine Creek. Jack accepted the coffee with a smile. "Reminds me of someone else at that age. I recall a certain little girl who couldn't sit still for more than 2 minutes." Sarah laughed, the sound carrying across the yard. "I've calmed down considerably since then." "Some days I wonder," Jack teased, enjoying the easy relationship they had rebuilt over the past year. The sound of tires on gravel announced visitors. A patrol car pulled up, followed by a familiar van with the Second Chance Animal Rescue logo painted on its side. Sheriff Tanner stepped out of his vehicle, and a sleek, professional-looking German shepherd exited with him. Scout, now fully grown and trained, wore his K9 unit vest with an almost palpable pride. He maintained perfect heel position until Tanner gave him the release command, at which point the formal police dog demeanor gave way to excited recognition as he spotted his mother and sister. "Look who graduated top of his class," Tanner announced proudly, as Scout bounded over to greet Luna with respectful deference, then engaged in a playful reunion with Star. "Already helped us track down 2 missing hikers last month." From the rescue van emerged Doctor. Maya, Thunder at her side. The largest of Luna's puppies had grown into a gentle giant, his calm temperament perfect for his work as a therapy dog. Around his neck hung his therapy dog certification tags, gleaming in the evening light. "Perfect timing," Jack said, rising to greet them. Sarah just made a fresh pot of coffee. As their extended family gathered on the porch, Jack reflected on the unlikely chain of events that had brought them all together. Victor Hargrove had eventually been sentenced to 8 years in prison for animal cruelty, attempted breaking and entering, and conspiracy to commit assault. His breeding facility had been permanently closed, the property eventually purchased by Second Chance Animal Rescue with the help of a generous anonymous donation, though Jack suspected Agent Lawson had pulled some strings with a wealthy animal rights advocate she knew. The case had drawn national attention, leading to stricter regulations on breeding operations throughout the state and increased funding for animal welfare investigations. Maggie had expanded her rescue operation, with Dr. Maya now working full-time providing veterinary care for rescued animals. Sheriff Tanner had established a dedicated animal crimes unit, with Scout as its first K9 officer. As for Jack and Sarah, they had found a new purpose together. What had begun as caring for one desperate mother dog had evolved into a small sanctuary for senior and special needs German shepherds. Currently, 3 older rescues shared their property, each with their own story of hardship and recovery. Jack's medical training and Sarah's organizational skills had combined to create a peaceful haven where dogs who might otherwise have been euthanized could live out their lives in comfort and dignity. The sound of laughter drew Jack back to the present. Thunder was demonstrating his newest therapy dog trick for everyone, carrying a small basket of flowers and presenting it to Sarah with gentle precision. The massive dog's soft eyes and careful movements belied his imposing size. "He's a natural with the kids at the hospital," Maya explained proudly. "Last week he helped a little girl take her first steps after surgery. She was determined to walk to Thunder, and he waited so patiently, encouraging her every inch of the way." "Scout's no slouch either," Tanner added. Got himself featured in the county newspaper last month after finding that lost kindergartner in Peterson's woods. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard, all four of Luna's offspring gathered near their mother. Despite their different lives and purposes, the family connection remained strong. Luna observed her grown puppies with what Jack could only describe as maternal pride, her eyes moving from one to another as if counting them, ensuring each was healthy and fulfilled. The conversation flowed easily as twilight descended, friends sharing stories and laughter. Mrs. Peterson arrived with her famous apple pie, followed by Tom Wilson and his wife bearing a casserole. Agent Lawson joined them later, bringing news of another successful prosecution of an illegal breeder. "You've started quite the movement here, Jack," Lawson remarked, watching as Luna rested her head contentedly on Jack's knee. One dog, one choice to help. It's had ripple effects throughout the state. Jack shook his head modestly. Luna did the hard part. She's the one who had the courage to run, to seek help, to trust a stranger. And you had the courage to open your door and your heart, Sarah added softly, reaching over to squeeze her father's hand. As darkness fell completely, their friends gradually departed, promising to return soon. Sarah retreated inside to prepare dinner, Shadow faithfully at her side. Scout and Thunder had been welcomed back for their monthly family reunion, a tradition that had begun 6 months earlier, when they'd noticed how the siblings seemed to recognize and delight in each other's company despite their separate lives. Left alone on the porch with Luna and Star, Jack gazed up at the clear night sky, stars emerging one by one. He remembered the bleak emptiness that had once filled his days after Eleanor's death, the hollow silence of the cabin, the aimless passing of time without purpose or joy. "You saved more than just yourself and your puppies that night," he whispered to Luna, who pressed closer against his leg in response. Star, sensing the moment's significance, settled quietly at his feet instead of continuing her usual playful activities. The three of them sat in comfortable silence, bound by something deeper than words could express. Jack thought of Eleanor then, as he often did in quiet moments, but the sharp pain of loss had transformed over time into gentle remembrance. He liked to think she had somehow guided Luna to his door that snowy night, finding a way to fill his empty days with purpose and his silent home with life again. Inside, Sarah was singing softly as she cooked, a habit she had inherited from her mother. The aroma of home-cooked food drifted out to the porch, mingling with the scent of pine and fresh earth. On the floor near the fireplace, Thunder and Scout had settled together, their breathing synchronized in the way of littermates reunited. The older rescue dogs had claimed their favorite spots around the living room, secure in the knowledge that they were home, safe, and cherished. Jack Morgan, once soldier, then widower, now rescuer and healer, felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. Life had taken unexpected turns, bringing both sorrows and joys he could never have anticipated. But sitting here with Luna, pressed warm against him and Star at his feet, surrounded by the family they had built together, he wouldn't change a single step of the journey. "Come on, girls," he said finally, rising from his chair. "Let's go home." Luna stood immediately, her tail wagging gently. Star bounced to her feet, always ready for the next adventure. As Jack opened the door to the warm light and laughter spilling from inside, Luna paused on the threshold, looking back at the starry sky as if remembering her desperate journey through the snow. Then she turned to Jack, her amber eyes meeting his with absolute trust and affection. In that moment, Jack understood what true rescue meant. It wasn't just about saving a life in a moment of crisis. It was about giving that life meaning, purpose, and love every day that followed. Luna had taught him that, and in saving her he had found salvation himself. Together, they stepped inside, closing the door on the darkness outside and walking into the light of home.